Today for Goals Question Time on our webinar, I've got the pleasure of being joined by Nigel Kershaw, who is with the Big Issue Group, being chairman of the group and as co-founder of the Big Exchange, which is the main topic of today's discussion. Hi, Nigel.
Hi there. Okay.
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been such a great supporter of the Big Issue of your purpose-driven things that you've known for the homeless people and selling magazines. Now we're in lockdown with our pandemic. I'm not getting to see the lady that I normally get to see and sort of support. But we have, during this pandemic, been supporting the Big Issue through donations, through the people who've been on our webinars. So I'm really pleased to have you on today and reflecting on, I think, a great innovation.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased that you've been supporting us. And now you can actually support your lady vendor. Because if you go onto the Big Issue website, you can now put in your postcode, find out where your nearest vendor is who is cashless. And you can buy the magazine digitally from that vendor who will receive half your money and the other. So if you
go I don't have to physically see her.
No, you can do that during lockdown.
Right.
So we're making it, and that's all part of the digital pivot that we've had to do during lockdown. And most interesting, it means that vendor, in order to receive that money, has to be cashless, which means they have to have a bank account. And that is a journey, part of the journey to financial inclusion.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I'll certainly go and look that up. But I do miss seeing her because I've been giving her Christmas presents for her children and that as well. So look forward to being back in person. So Nigel, great. Over to you. Could you give us a bit of brief history first of all, then, about the Big Issue and the introduction and why you've got to where you've got to before we get on to the Big Exchange itself. The Big Issue first for those people who don't recognise it.
Well, the Big Issue is, if I came to you 30 years ago, with John Bird, co-founder, and Gordon Roddick, who was Anita Roddick, of the Body Shop's husband, and said, well, look, we're going to start a magazine and it's going to be, in 30 years' time, instead of the last bastion of independent reporting, it's going to be a full-colour magazine. It's going to be one of the most recognised brand and the most trusted brand in the UK. And it's going to replicate 100 times all over the globe. Oh, and by the way, this magazine is going to be sold by homeless and vulnerably housed people on the streets. You can't buy it in a newsagent. And by the way, it's not a charity because we're going to sell it to the seller, to the vendor for £1.50, and they're going to sell it to you for £3. So we now have 2,100 micro entrepreneurs on the street, and oh, by the way, we're going to make loads of money, hopefully, because the more money we make, the more money those vendors make, which is an alternative to begging and stealing and street crime and so on. And then we're going to mug ourselves on the way to the bank and give all our money back into the mission with the purpose of getting as many of those vendors off the streets as possible to do ourselves out of business. And that was the Big Issue. Completely counterintuitive.
So it's 30 years you've been running.
30 years this September.
Yeah. And what's been the inspiration now then between the Big Exchange, which again is now really quite radical and different again. So give us your 30-year mission going forward now from where you're at.
Well, it's really strange because John Bird and I, we never had a strategy. He was very instinctive. So the Big Issue was all about financial inclusion. So, vendors earning a living. Then in 2001, HBOS, the Halifax Bank of Scotland, now Lloyds, or part of Lloyds, opened a branch for homeless people in our Glasgow offices on a Thursday afternoon. And that was the first time people could get a bank account without a fixed abode. And so we always had this. When we first started, we actually had something called the vendor savings schemes, where 30 to 50% of our vendors were being mugged on the streets for their money that they'd earned. So we said, oh, why don't you just keep it with us? We have a double entry bookkeeping, and we'll keep it in the safe and keep it safe for you, and then you can come and take it out. we have no idea until somebody on the FCA or FSA, as it was then, said, "Do you know you're running a bank?" We said, "No, we're not. We're just saving vendors being mugged on the
Stop them
streets."
being mugged, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so, and then it was, and given our Irish connections, it was, and a lot of people remember Mo Molam, but Mo Molam's husband was a merchant banker that gave it up all to be an artist. And John and I were thinking about other things around debt and inclusion. And he said, well, gave us some scale, and we thought, okay, why don't we replicate what Gordon Roddick did for The Big Issue, where they took a venture, almost the beginnings of social venture, venturing, and I think has put that venture money in that founded The Big Issue. Why can't we do that for others? So we started to think about that. And then I was in the States learning a lot from America around social investment, who are far ahead of us, and in some places still are, than we are here.
Mm-hmm.
And John was doing something in the UK called Social Brokers, and rang up one day and said, do you fancy doing a social bank? And I said, all right, off we go. And off we went.
When was this, Nigel? When was that?
This was in 2002, one or
right.
two. So it was really, there was no logic other than it felt right. And it's only after we realised it was a strategist would have worked it out. This was an extension of the mission. And the mission, if it's all about prevention of poverty for future generations, then the best way of doing that is investing in other organisations that are doing exactly that. So we set up Big Issue Invest, which now manages or advises on about 300 million of social funds, invested in about 400 social enterprises and charities throughout the UK, and off we went. So in 2010, we launched our first limited partner fund, so we invested in social enterprise, directly in social enterprises. And I was doing a talk in a city, and somebody said, why can't the ordinary big issue reader invest in your funds? I thought, you are dead right, because this was for sophisticated investors, qualified investors, corporates, institutions, banks, high net worth, ultra high net worth, trusts, all that. And so we really started to go down the road of what we call the democratization of capital. How can ordinary people invest their savings in things that give them a financial return, plus do something for people and planet? So with Columbia Threadneedle, we launched the UK Social Bond Fund, and that was in end of 2013, and now really was the pioneering impact bond fund, where we invest in corporate bonds that we think are delivering a more balanced and inclusive UK. We then, with Aberdeen Standard, launched an employment impact fund 2 years ago, which was to create more employment, decent employment in the UK. And in January, we're going to launch a climate fund, a climate solutions fund. So we had this idea, and then at Threadneedle, the CEO was called Campbell Fleming, and he really was our great supporter. And 2014, we started to play around with what became the Big Exchange, and there was a famous breakfast 3 years ago, this December, where we got a group of people together and dreamt the whole thing up.
Right.
And that's how we got really around the democratization of capital.
And you're very driven by sort of B Corp sort of type mentality and approach, and the types of organizations. And I've spoken to Paul Lindley previously, who's the founder of Ella's Kitchen, around sort of the B Corp principles. So where do you overlap with those types of principles in terms of how you approach it and how other funds and the funds work?
Well, in Big Issue is a founding B Corp member in the UK, so
right,
and that would fit. But also the Big Exchange is a B Corp pending, because after launch you have to spend a year or something proving you are a B Corp. And so really it's because we wanted to identify with being a B Corp, we wanted to identify that this is a mission-driven business. And in fact, within the business, we have what's called the M share, and it's a mission share, which means that, and the big issue holds that mission share, and it's to protect the Constitution, to make sure that it can't be changed unless it follows mission. But of course, really going all the way back is, we talked about Gordon and Anita Roddick. But if you can remember those body shop wagons going down the street, when one side was an advert for peppermint foot lotion and the other side a campaign against domestic violence.
Yeah.
And there was absolutely no contradiction, because what the body shop was doing was marketing its core values. So it never had a CSR department, it just had a vision department. And I think more and more what you're seeing is those business for purposes, where you're seeing that the mission and the values are being aligned with the business. And that has been an incredible change in 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So the big exchange now, that this has just launched in terms of having funds, and we're able to invest in it, as part of our sort of financial planning. So give us that now on how that is operating.
Well, we've got there's three parts of the big exchange. One is the impact investing platform. The other part is a financial inclusion platform, and the other part is an ethical marketplace. And so we launched with the investing platform. And so we've got right now 40 funds, all from listed companies, listed funds from 13 asset managers, and they're ranging from the really big players like Aberdeen and Columbia Threadneedle, Lion Trust, all the way down to those very niche funds and pioneering funds like Webb, which are one of the pioneers. So there's 40 funds in, with the combined assets under administration of well over 23 billion now. And we've got those funds in 3 bundles, and you can choose between a low, medium, or a higher risk bundle, or you can pick individual funds, and you can invest in those in your ISA, your JISA, your general, or we're soon to be having, you can put your self-invested pension into it. But the key to it all those funds are rated for their impact. So given it's a consumer platform, there are all these, mind-boggling methodologies about how to measure impact. And for a consumer, I think that it's about the trust of the big issue brand.
Yeah.
So we've devised a methodology. It's independently rated, and we divide the funds into gold, silver, and bronze medals according to how they contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals for people and planet. And so there's a real simplicity to it. But if you go in underneath it, you can find out more about the fund, more about the fund manager, more about particularly the controversies. And for us, one of the key things is those asset managers being transparent. People just don't know what they're investing in. People have no idea what their ISA is or any of those. So transparency is the absolute key to that. And so we've launched, and it's minimal fees. It's one of the lowest in the marketplace at 25 basic points per for what you invest in, plus the asset manager. You can do £25 a month or £100 lump sum. So the idea is just to crowd people into saying you don't have to sacrifice. Oh, sorry, I need to be compliant here.
That's right. I was going to say, you need to give an emphasis. We're not giving financial advice here. I'm not.
Yeah. I'm not telling you to do it. But what we're trying to do, what we're seeking to do, is not necessarily, I repeat, not necessarily sacrificing financial return in order to to get a people and planet return.
Yeah, certainly. So in the practical terms, I'm in the fortunate position of having to have some ISAs and having a pension I'm saving with my independent financial advisor. I could turn around to him and say, hey, look at the big exchange platform, and I'd like to see about investing on that. So that's
you will be soon, but right now we're not doing it through financial advisors. It's all retail. It's all for the individual.
Right. So I'd have to go on there and just decide myself to put some.
Yes. And you could switch your ISA even on that. So we've had people switching ISAs and so on. We hope to have being able to get the advisors to come on, but it is the next stage. Right now it's just the launch with
Okay. No, that's great. So people can just search for the big exchange and they'll find you and that under that sort of funding.
Yeah, just on bigexchange.com.
So Nigel, I'd like to get your perspectives. The core that I've been doing over the last 20 years is about getting corporates around corporate venture investing, and looking at new opportunities for investing in new technologies, new business models. But certainly with this trend of B Corp impact investing, what I'm finding sometimes is a struggle for them to get out of their just doing investing and then thinking of corporate social responsibility as a different department. Mm-hmm. Have you got perspectives on that, on how corporates can shift and do this dual thinking?
Well, it's really interesting that because on the exchange we've had 25 corporate partners, and we've raised $7.5 million. 2 million of that was in cash. The other was in kind, but that in kind has included, huge amount of technology build. It probably cost us 10 million odd pounds to build the platform.
Right.
But, we had FNZ behind the platform, Herbert Smith Freehills giving us untold legal advice. And the interesting thing about that is that that some of the investors took out equity because that's what they wanted to do. Some of them actually took out just donation in kind because that's what they wanted to do. Some of them even granted through our foundation, who then has become a shareholder in Invest. And it was a myriad of things that you can see that, and yourself, you talk to somebody about, purpose led, and some people, and even if you start at the chair of the CEO, you don't know whether you're going to go down the treasury, you don't know whether you're going to go marketing, charity, or HR. It's just all this because nobody understands. What I think, and I know you do, you're finding is that as more people understand and enlightened about what we're doing, it's been very interesting. For example, we've had many companies that have said, we want to get involved because actually we need to keep our staff engaged. That we're getting a whole load of millennial staff coming in and who are asking the question, even at interviews, which is not millennial enough, even at interviews are saying, what are you doing? As this interest increases, we found that all that cross-pollination between different departments and different corporates, that's really worked. And that surprised some of the corporates that actually it benefited them and their staff.
Yes.
And then I think what we've been able to show in other areas is that the huge amount of impact that can be made. So, for example, our corporate social venturing program, which we've just finished the last one in Scotland called Power Up Scotland, and it's had the most incredible effect. Hey Girls, which is national now and been all over the news and etc., which is addressing period poverty, and has led to now not being charged and incredible change, of which people like Aberdeen, Experian, University of Edinburgh, Brodie's as a solicitor. I'm going to miss somebody out, I know. Just incredibly proud of what they achieved by putting in not an awful lot, but some investment money.
Yeah.
And then getting their staff utilised and getting their staff engaged in making those changes.
Yeah.
Right through to what we're seeing in things like exchange, where we're now talking about substantial for the next round, substantial corporate venturing money coming into the exchange.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm not
I think
seeing a contradiction.
And going back to where we opened this sort of conversation, really, about how you and John Bird and the founders of The Big Issue, how you went about creating those ventures. I know when I've had you and your colleagues from The Big Issue and these groups involved in some of the sessions I've had with corporates and with ventures, startups, they're so inspired by that entrepreneurial get up, let's do it, and finding different customer needs, finding different sort of society needs, and addressing those in a purposeful and profit-driven way. And it opens up their mind. So it's not just about, you say, about engaging the young people, engaging employees in doing like charity type stuff. I think it's so important seeing how new technologies, new business models, and new purposeful-driven ways can be good for the business and good for the planet and good for people and that as well. And that's what I find so inspirational, talking to you and your colleagues and that as well.
Well, so we were talking about, like, when John and Gordon were the co-founders of The Big Issue. Now, we come from a heritage of a publicly traded international PLC called The Body Shop.
Yeah.
And so it was always in the DNA that you were looking at sustainable solutions, business solutions, rather than charitable solutions.
Yeah.
And so that was in the DNA. So then looking at what other corporates are doing, some amazing stuff, and fulfilling both profit and purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's great when it mixes together. It's the perfect. I was going to say the perfect storm, but that is actually the wrong word to use, isn't it? So
yeah. No, those synergies.
The perfect whatever.
No, it's definitely
match.
When those get alignment, and I think we're now seeing around sustainability for the planet, improving people's outcomes in health and sort of stuff like that. I think we're now seeing that it's not a trade-off. It's not either sort of or. It's we can do these things and that together now if we think about deploying technology and engaging people in different ways. So I think that's the bit which becomes really exciting.
Well, I think of the two things you say. One is around, the technology is just opening up stuff, whether that be open banking, whether that be this speed, as it develops. I know we all had great hopes a few years ago, but I still think we're probably going to see the speed, ease, and the lowering of costs on transactions through blockchain, and so on. Not necessarily currencies, but just on blockchain transactions. And I think that's going to make a huge difference. I think that's going to make a big difference in supply chains and veracity of supply chains and so on. And then you just see what's happened in this tragedy of COVID. I mean, absolute tragedy. But you see, for example, where the impact funds have held up against mainstream funds. And why wouldn't it? It's about the future. So, it's about vaccines, and it's about health, and it's about a more sustainable world. It's about not having orphan fossil assets and so on. So you've seen a huge demand. You've seen probably for the first time, I think, your advisor, who I don't know who they are, or who that person is, but would probably say, well, impact investing, it's never been proved and so on. Well, it's gone through the crisis of COVID and stood out better than the mainstream, because it's about futures. And it's a real demonstration that that investing with impact actually is viable.
No, I think as you're saying, we've seen through this pandemic and this crisis that what would have taken 5 years to develop has developed in the first sort of 5 months of the pandemic. As you said, we went cashless, we went contactless, we changed the way that we purchase things. We changed the ways that we were thinking about sustainability. We changed the way we were thinking about caring for other people in the community. So I think we should all be more optimistic as we move into into the next year and the sort of things that you're going to be launching.
Yeah, and I think it's redefined economics in a way. One is because I don't think anybody can buy the slice of the cake argument anymore, because there seemed to be a lot more of the cake than we ever thought. Yeah. And I'm sure we're going to have to, it'll come back. Then we'll have to, we'll have to replenish the cake and so on. But it actually just shows, I think, the speed that government and corporates can move, when there is when it's needed like that. I think there's a growing feeling of internationalism around it, because you realise this is not a countrywide solution.
Yeah.
So I think all sorts of things, and I mean, guess what? Now really for any business, and particularly for our purpose businesses, is what are we going to do about the huge numbers of particularly young unemployed people as we come out of this crisis.
Yeah.
I think what's we got to be addressing.
Yeah. Nigel, it's been inspirational seeing you again, and I know you're in Ireland, I'm in London, and hopefully our ships won't pass in the night as I head to Ireland and you head back to London. So I
will see you in Longford on your way to Westport very soon, I hope.
I hope so. Or I'll see you when you're back in London for a coffee when we pass each other in the street on the South Bank.
I look forward to that, and thank you. I really enjoyed that.
Nigel, my friend, thank you very much, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you, Nigel. Bye for now.
See you later. Bye.